What's the worst case of rich kid syndrome you've seen? When I started working as a teaching assistant at an elite private school, I met Josh Henderson, the most entitled 16-year-old I'd ever seen. His dad owned half the real estate in our city, and Josh never let anyone forget it. This kid would park his brand new Range Rover across 3 spots in the student lot so peasants wouldn't scratch it. He'd throw his $2,000 laptop in the trash if it got too slow, then buy a new one the next day. Once he made a freshman cry because her cheap shoes scuffed his designer backpack. But the worst part, Josh was failing chemistry, and his dad was on the school board. That meant nobody could give him the F he deserved. Teachers would mysteriously change his grades right before report cards. Everyone knew what was happening, but nobody dared speak up. I was just a TA trying to pay for grad school, so I kept my mouth shut too. Until one day Josh went too far. We had this really sweet student named Amy. Her mom cleaned houses for a living and had saved for years to send her here on partial scholarship. Amy was brilliant at chemistry, like future medical researcher brilliant. The day before the big midterm project, Josh cornered Amy in the lab. I overheard him offering her $5,000 to do his project for him. When she refused, he switched tactics. "My dad knows the admission board at Yale," he smirked. "It would be a shame if someone told them the scholarship girl cheats on tests." Amy came to me crying. She couldn't risk losing her shot at Yale, but she also couldn't afford to get caught cheating. I told her to trust me and accept his offer. See, what Josh didn't know was that I'd been documenting everything for months. Every mysteriously changed grade. Every time teachers were pressured to pass him, even recordings of him bragging about his dad's donations, getting him out of trouble. The next day, Josh proudly presented his project to the class. The teacher, Dr. Wright, knew it was really Amy's work but started to give him an A. Anyway, that's when I raised my hand. "Actually, I think there's been a mistake," I said, pulling out my phone. "I have some interesting recordings everyone should hear." Josh's smug smile vanished. "You can't prove anything," he snapped. "And my dad will have you fired." I smiled back. "Your dad isn't the only one with connections." I turned to Dr. Wright. "I've already sent copies to the State Board of Education, the Accreditation Committee, and 3 local news stations. Want to hear them?" The color drained from Josh's face. Dr. Wright looked like she might faint. By lunch, the principal had called an emergency board meeting. But here's where it gets good. Josh's dad showed up ready to destroy me. Instead, he found his son's entire history of bribes, threats, and cheating laid out in a thick folder, plus evidence of the school covering it up, which could cost them their accreditation. "Fire the TA," he demanded. "I'll pull my funding." The board chairman actually laughed. "Pull it. These records show years of academic fraud. If this gets out, every grade, every diploma we've issued becomes questionable. Your money can't fix that." Josh's dad deflated like a popped balloon. 2 hours later, they reached a deal. Josh would transfer to public school, and in exchange, the evidence would stay private. The next morning, Josh's precious Range Rover was gone from the parking lot. Amy got full credit for her project, plus a glowing recommendation letter for Yale. But the best part, a week later, I saw Josh riding the public bus to his new school. When I started working as a teaching assistant at an elite private school, I met Josh Henderson, easily the most entitled 16-year-old I'd ever encountered. His dad owned half the real estate in our city, and Josh never let anyone forget it. He routinely parked his brand new Range Rover across 3 spots in the student lot so peasants wouldn't scratch it. He'd throw a $2,000 laptop in the trash if it got slow, buying a brand new one the next day like it was nothing. He once made a freshman cry just because her cheap shoes accidentally scuffed his designer backpack. But the worst part wasn't his spoiled behavior. It was the way he abused the system. Josh was failing chemistry, and his dad was on the school board. That meant no teacher could hold him accountable. Grades mysteriously improved right before report cards went out. Everyone knew what was happening, but no one dared speak up. As a TA trying to pay for grad school, I stayed quiet. Until the day Josh went too far. Amy was a sweet girl at the school, one of the smartest students I'd ever seen, gifted at chemistry with dreams of becoming a medical researcher. Her mom cleaned houses and had saved for years to send Amy to the school on a partial scholarship. The day before a major midterm project was due, I overheard Josh corner Amy in the chemistry lab. He offered her $5,000 to do his project for him. When Amy refused, Josh switched tactics. "My dad knows the admissions board at Yale," he sneered. "It'd be a shame if they found out the scholarship girl cheats on tests." Amy came to me sobbing. She didn't want to throw away her chance at Yale, but she also couldn't risk getting caught cheating. I told her to trust me and accept Josh's offer, not to cheat, but so I could gather evidence. What Josh didn't know was that I'd been documenting everything for months already. Every mysteriously changed grade. Teachers being pressured to pass him, and even recordings of him bragging about his dad's donations to the school. The next day, Josh confidently presented his project to the class. Dr. Wright, the teacher, knew it wasn't Josh's work but was still about to give him an A. Until I raised my hand. Actually, I think there's been a mistake, I said, pulling out my phone. I have some interesting recordings you should hear. Josh's smug smile vanished instantly. You can't prove anything, he snapped. And my dad will have you fired. I smiled back. Your dad's not the only one with connections. Turning to Dr. Wright, I said, I've already sent copies to the State Board of Education, the Accreditation Committee, and 3 local news stations. Want to hear them? The color drained from Josh's face. Dr. Wright looked like she might faint. By lunch, the principal had called an emergency board meeting. Then things got really interesting. Josh's dad showed up ready to destroy me. Instead, he was handed a thick folder documenting his son's years of bribes, threats and cheating, plus evidence of the school covering it up, which could jeopardize their accreditation. Fire the TA, he demanded. Or I'll pull my funding. The board chairman laughed. Pull it. These records prove years of academic fraud. If this leaks, every grade and diploma becomes questionable. Your money can't fix that. Josh's dad deflated like a popped balloon. 2 hours later, they reached a deal. Josh would transfer to public school, and the evidence would remain private. The next morning, Josh's prized Range Rover was gone from the parking lot. Amy received full credit for her project, plus a glowing recommendation letter for Yale. But best of all, a week later, I saw Josh riding the public bus to his new school. Story 2. My ex looked at the judge and said, He's unstable. He lies to our daughter. I want full custody. The judge looked convinced. I couldn't speak. But then my 7-year-old stood up and said, I brought a video from Mommy's phone. I think the judge should see it. The room fell completely silent as the screen turned on. Chapter 1. Silenced in court. The courtroom smelled of polished wood and old books, the kind of room where lives were quietly dismantled by signatures and gavels. I sat at the petitioner's table, hands trembling beneath the surface, my throat tight as my ex-wife's lawyer painted me as a monster. She sat beside him, perfectly composed, voice dripping with practiced innocence. Your Honor, he's unstable. He lies to our daughter. He manipulates her against me. I want full custody. The words pierced me deeper than any slap or insult ever could. I wanted to stand, to shout the truth, to tell the judge about the nights I stayed up with our daughter when she was sick, the birthdays I planned alone, the sacrifices I made, but my voice caught, stuck in my chest. The judge leaned forward, brow furrowed, his expression hardening in her favor. For a moment, I saw the future flash before me. My daughter slipping through my fingers. Her childhood stolen by lies I couldn't fight. And then a small voice cut through the silence. My daughter, only 7 years old, she stood, clutching her tiny backpack, her voice steady, though her hands shook. Your Honor, I brought a video from Mommy's phone. I think you should see it. The entire courtroom froze. Even the judge leaned back in surprise. The room that had been filled with her lies went dead silent as the bife carried her backpack forward and pulled out a phone. And in that silence, I felt hope for the first time. Chapter 2, the video begins. The judge motioned for the baif to bring the phone forward. My daughter, tiny but determined, whispered the password to him. Her bravery shook me. She was only 7, yet she carried herself with more courage than most adults. The screen lit up and the first video played. There she was, my ex-wife, pacing the kitchen late at night, phone propped on the counter, unaware it was recording. Her voice was venomous. I don't care what he says. I'll make sure the judge thinks he's unstable. I'll tell them he lies to our daughter. That's the easiest way to get full custody. Once he's out of the picture, I'll get everything. Gasps echoed through the courtroom. Even the stenographer froze, hands hovering above the keys. My ex's lawyer went pale, whispering frantically into her ear, but she sat stoned still, her face draining of color as her own words filled the room. The judge, who only moments earlier had leaned toward her side, now sat back with narrowed eyes. His pen tapped against the bench, his gaze fixed on her with the weight of betrayal. He raised his hand, signaling for the video to continue. The next clip began. This time, she was laughing with a friend over the phone. It doesn't matter what's true. Judges always believe the mother anyway. He's too soft, too quiet, he won't fight back. By the time he realizes, I'll have everything. My stomach twisted, but the shame wasn't mine anymore. It was hers. The courtroom once stacked against me now belonged to the truth. And the truth came not from me, but from the one person she thought she had under control. Our daughter. The video wasn't finished yet. Chapter 3, The Truth Unfolds. The video kept rolling, each clip cutting deeper than the last. My daughter's small hand clutched the strap of her backpack as she watched her mother's words expose themselves on the big screen. The third clip showed her sitting at a cafe whispering into her phone. I've already told our daughter what to say. If she repeats it in court, he won't stand a chance. Judges eat that up. He's too naive to know I've turned her against him. A wave of disgust rippled through the courtroom. A mother weaponizing her own child. People shifted uncomfortably in their seats, some shaking their heads in disbelief. The judge's pen, which had been tapping, now stopped completely. He leaned forward, eyes locked on my ex. Her lawyer scrambled to object. Your Honor, this evidence was obtained without proper, but the judge cut him off, his voice cold. Silence. This court will not ignore what it just heard. The authenticity is not in question. These are her words, her actions. The lawyer sank back, defeated. The gavel of truth had already fallen even before the verdict. For the first time that day, I turned to look at my daughter. She sat tall, her eyes wet, but steady, as if she understood the weight of what she had just done. At 7 years old, she had spoken louder than any attorney ever could. She hadn't just saved me, she had saved herself. My ex had tried to brand me unstable, a liar, a danger. But with every word of her own recordings, the mask she wore cracked until nothing was left but the truth. And the truth was about to cost her everything. Chapter 4, The Verdict Shifts. The air inside the courtroom was heavy, charged with the weight of undeniable truth. My ex-wife sat stiff, her hands trembling slightly as the video stopped playing. The silence that followed was louder than any accusation I could have ever made. Moments earlier, the judge's eyes had softened toward her testimony, his pen nodding along with her lawyer's words, but now his face was stone. He removed his glasses, set them on the desk, and looked directly at her. You stood in this courtroom and accused him of instability, of lies, of manipulating your daughter. Yet it is clear you are the one who has lied, manipulated, and sought to deceive this court. Do you deny your own words? She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. For the first time in years, she had no script to hide behind. Her attorney tried to salvage it, his words stumbling. Your Honor, perhaps she was venting. Private frustrations taken out of context. The judge cut him off sharply. Private frustrations don't include instructions on how to coach a child to lie in sworn testimony. This court does not tolerate perjury, especially when it endangers the welfare of a child. A ripple of murmurs ran through the gallery. Even strangers sitting in the back knew what this meant. Her case was crumbling live in front of everyone. The judge turned to me, his voice softer. Sir, do you wish to add anything? For the first time that day, I could finally speak. My throat loosened, my voice clear. Only this, Your Honor. I never lied to my daughter. She knew the truth all along, and today she proved stronger than both of us. I looked over at my daughter. She smiled faintly, the weight of her bravery shining in her eyes. The gavel hadn't fallen yet, but everyone in the room already knew. The custody battle was no longer hers to win. The judge's decision was coming, and it would destroy every lie she had built. Chapter 5, The Custody Verdict. The judge's gavel struck once, sharp and echoing, pulling the courtroom into stillness. My ex-wife sat rigid, her face pale, her lawyer hunched beside her like a man already defeated. My daughter gripped her backpack tightly, waiting for the words that would decide her future. The judge cleared his throat, voice steady but heavy with judgment. This court has witnessed clear and deliberate attempts to manipulate testimony to deceive the court and to harm the emotional well-being of a child. Such behavior is not only reprehensible, it is dangerous. He turned his gaze on my ex-wife, each word slicing through her silence. You claimed he was unstable, that he lied to your daughter. Yet the evidence proves the opposite. It is you who lied. You who manipulated and you who attempted to weaponize your daughter for your own gain. This court will not reward deceit. Then his tone shifted, firm, final. Full custody is awarded to the father. The mother's visitation rights will be supervised until she completes parental counseling and demonstrates fitness to this court, effective immediately. The words rang like thunder. My daughter gasped softly, then looked at me with eyes wide in relief. My ex-wife let out a strangled protest, but the bailiff's hand on her shoulder silenced her. She wasn't the victim anymore. She was exposed. People in the gallery exchanged glances, some with pity, others with quiet satisfaction at seeing justice served so plainly. Even the court reporter, who had seen it all, blinked rapidly, as though holding back her own emotions. For me, the moment felt surreal. After months of silence, of being painted as unstable and unworthy, the truth had finally spoken louder than lies, and it hadn't been me who proved it. It had been my daughter. The judge's gavel fell again. This court is adjourned. And with that sound, everything my ex-wife had tried to steal from me, custody, dignity, the truth, was gone forever. But the lesson for her was just beginning. Chapter 6, the final lesson and aftermath. The courtroom verdict wasn't just the end of a custody battle. It was the turning point of all our lives. My ex-wife left the courthouse not as a triumphant mother, but as a disgraced manipulator. Socially, whispers followed her everywhere. Friends she once bragged to now avoided her, unwilling to be associated with someone who had weaponized her child. Legally, her supervised visitation was a humiliation she couldn't escape. Every hour she spent with our daughter watched and documented. Personally, her relationship with our daughter fractured. Trust once broken doesn't rebuild with apologies. The lies she thought would make her powerful became the chains that bound her. For me, the most powerful victory wasn't the legal win. It was watching my daughter bloom after the storm. She walked taller, no longer carrying the burden of her mother's manipulations. She learned that even at 7 years old, truth had power, more than lies, more than intimidation. She reminded me that bravery doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's a quiet voice saying, "I brought a video." Her courage taught me that this battle wasn't just about custody. It was about showing her what integrity looks like. Life after court wasn't without challenges, but peace slowly replaced chaos. The house was filled with laughter again, not whispered fears. Bedtime stories were about heroes, not the fear of being taken away. And for the first time in years, I slept without the weight of constant accusation. I realized my ex had been right about one thing. This fight was about stability. But in the end, the judge saw what my daughter already knew. I was the stable one all along. She told the court, "He's unstable. He lies to our daughter." But in the end, it was my daughter, the very person she tried to use as a weapon, who revealed the truth. And that truth didn't just save me. It destroyed her lies forever. Epilogue. Years later, since you asked me to continue, let's carry the story forward beyond the verdict into the years when the scars and lessons of that courtroom battle fully reveal themselves. My ex never regained her footing. Visitation. For months, every visit was under watch. Her words and actions recorded by court-appointed supervisors. The very freedom she tried to strip from me was stripped from her instead. Reputation. Parents whispered at school events, avoiding her. Friends who once rallied behind her custody fight now distanced themselves, afraid of being tied to a liar exposed in court. Guilt. Over time, even her own family stopped defending her. They had seen the videos too. She was left to live with the shame she had created. Those courtroom days became part of my daughter's story. Not a wound, but a source of strength. She learned early that truth has power, even when adults abuse lies. Her courage shaped her character. Teachers noticed her leadership. Friends leaned on her honesty, and I watched her grow with pride. The bond between us deepened. She had stood up for me at 7 years old, and I had stood by her ever since. One evening, years later, she said quietly at the dinner table, "Dad, when I spoke that day, I was scared. But I knew if I didn't, they wouldn't see who you really are." I'm glad I did. And in that moment, I realized she hadn't just saved me, she had saved us both. Life moved forward. I built a stable home free from the constant battle of accusations. I didn't have to prove myself anymore. Not to her, not to anyone. The court had spoken, but more importantly, my daughter had spoken. That was the only judgment that mattered.